Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments what city or country you're watching from. Tonight's story is about a mother pushed into the rain, a daughter forced to choose between dignity and survival, and a billionaire who finally opened the door everyone else wanted closed. Get her out of this house. Juliet Voss pointed toward the front entrance as if 70-year-old Lillian Hayes was something the staff had forgotten to remove before dinner. The old woman stood beneath the chandelier in a faded blue coat, one hand gripping a worn leather handbag and the other resting on her daughter's arm. Her daughter, 29-year-old black maid Simone Hayes, faced Juliet without lowering her eyes. "My mother came to see me," Simone said. "She hasn't disturbed anyone." She entered through the main door. The side entrance was locked. Then she should have waited outside. Rain struck the tall windows of the Beaumont estate. Thunder rolled above the gardens, and the evening temperature had already dropped close to freezing. Lillian's shoes were soaked through. Simone tightened her arm around her mother. "She took 2 buses to get here. Let me sit her in the staff kitchen until the storm passes." Juliet stepped closer in a white dinner dress. "This is my engagement weekend. I will not have your family wandering through rooms where investors and photographers can see them." "She is not wandering." "I don't care what word you prefer." Juliet turned to the doorman. "Put her outside." The man hesitated. "Miss Voss, the weather." "Did I ask for a forecast?" Simone moved between him and her mother. "No one is touching her." Juliet smiled coldly. "You forget who signs your paycheck. Mr. Beaumont signs it. And after Saturday, I will control this household." Lillian squeezed Simone's hand. "Baby, don't lose your job over me." Simone looked at the woman who had worked night shifts, cleaned offices, and skipped meals to keep her in school. "You are not something I should be ashamed of." Juliet's face hardened. "Then leave with her." The ballroom doors opened behind them. Guests began entering the foyer for a private engagement dinner. Heads turned. Conversations softened. Juliet saw the attention and instantly changed her expression. "This poor woman appears confused," she announced gently. "Simone, please take her somewhere appropriate." Lillian stared at her. "I am not confused." Juliet ignored her. "She may need medical supervision." Simone's anger sharpened. "My mother knows exactly where she is. Then she should know she does not belong here." The words landed harder than the thunder. Lillian lowered her gaze. Simone began unpinning the silver name badge from her uniform. "If she goes, I go." Juliet looked pleased. "Excellent." At that moment, the front doors opened again. A black umbrella appeared first, followed by 44-year-old billionaire Grant Beaumont. He had returned from the airport one day earlier than planned. Rain darkened the shoulders of his coat. He stopped beneath the doorway and took in the scene, Lillian shivering, Simone holding her badge, Juliet standing before a room full of guests. "What is happening?" he asked. Juliet moved toward him. "Grant, this woman entered the house without permission. Simone became aggressive when I asked security to escort her out." Grant looked at Lillian. "Are you Simone's mother?" "Yes, sir." "Then why are you standing in the cold?" Before Juliet could answer, Grant stepped back into the rain, opened the umbrella over Lillian, and held the front door wide. "Mrs. Hayes, please come inside." Silence filled the foyer. Then he looked at Simone. "You too." Juliet stared at him. "You're inviting them through the main entrance." "I'm opening the door to my own home. In front of our guests. In front of anyone who needs to see it." He guided Lillian toward the library fireplace and asked the housekeeper to bring dry towels, tea, and a doctor if she wanted one. Juliet followed. "You are undermining me over a maid." Grant removed his wet coat. "No. I'm correcting cruelty. She threatened to quit. Then I'm asking her not to." Simone still held the badge in her palm. Grant faced her. "You should never have been forced to choose between your mother and your work." Lillian studied him closely. "You sound like your father." Grant's expression changed. "You knew my father?" The room quieted. Lillian opened her handbag and removed a small wooden box wrapped in an old kitchen towel. "I worked for Arthur Beaumont before this house belonged to you," she said. Grant stared at the box. My father died 20 years ago. I know. Juliet moved closer. What is inside? Lillian did not look at her. Something Arthur told me to return only if the wrong woman tried to take control of this family. Grant slowly accepted the box. A brass plate on the lid carried the Beaumont crest. Beneath it, scratched by hand, were 6 words. For my son, before he signs anything. Grant looked toward Juliet. The engagement agreement was scheduled to be signed the next morning. Juliet's face had gone completely pale. Simone noticed. Her mother had not come only to visit. She had come to stop the wedding. And whatever waited inside that box had frightened Juliet more than public humiliation ever could, because for the first time that evening, the future Mrs. Beaumont looked not powerful, but trapped by a secret she immediately recognized. Grant placed the wooden box on the library table. Juliet reached for it. Lillian's hand shot out. Not you. The old woman's voice carried none of the weakness from the foyer. Grant looked between them. Mrs. Hayes, what did my father leave with you? Not an inheritance, Lillian said. A warning. She removed a brass key from her handbag and inserted it into the box. The lid opened with a soft click. Inside lay 3 objects, a faded photograph of Arthur Beaumont beside 12 household employees, a folded sheet sealed with blue wax, and a metal tag stamped with the number 17. Simone recognized her mother in the photograph, barely 25 and wearing a kitchen uniform. Grant picked it up. I've never seen this. Your father called us the original household, Lillian said. Cooks, drivers, cleaners, gardeners, nurses. When the old textile mill closed, most of us lost our pensions. Arthur promised that anyone who helped build this estate would never be abandoned. Juliet folded her arms. This has nothing to do with our engagement. Lillian looked directly at her. It has everything to do with it. Grant broke the seal. The paper was a list of 17 property deeds connected to a private employee trust called the Beaumont Household Covenant. At the bottom, Arthur had written, "The covenant cannot be sold, merged, or transferred through marriage. Any agreement attempting to do so is fraudulent." Grant read it twice. My attorneys said these properties belonged to a dormant family subsidiary. They paid housing support, medical bills, and retirement income for staff families, Lillian replied. Simone looked at her mother. Then why did we live above a laundromat? Pain crossed Lillian's face. Because the payments stopped 6 months after Arthur died. Grant turned toward Juliet. What does your family have to do with this? Nothing. Lillian pointed to the metal tag. Room 17. There is no room 17 here, Grant said. Not here. At the old Beaumont Hotel. The hotel had been closed for 15 years and was scheduled to enter a Voss redevelopment partnership after Grant signed the engagement agreement. Juliet stepped forward. That building is condemned. No, Lillian said. It was sealed. By whom? Arthur. Grant faced Juliet. How do you know about it? She hesitated. I read the redevelopment file. The file calls it the Beaumont Annex. It never mentions room 17. Simone watched Juliet's fingers tighten around her clutch. Lillian continued. Arthur kept the original covenant records there. He told me that if anyone tried moving the properties through a marriage contract, I was to bring Grant the key. Why wait 20 years? Simone asked. I didn't know about the agreement until Juliet's assistant came to my apartment. Grant's gaze sharpened. What assistant? A man named Felix Ward. He offered me $50,000 for this box. Juliet laughed. Anyone can use a false name. Lillian removed a business card from her handbag. Grant read it. Felix Ward, Voss Family Office, Special Projects. Juliet's face hardened. You believed a stranger. He knew Arthur's private phrase, Lillian said. What phrase? Open the door for those who opened it for you. Grant went still. His father had repeated those words every winter when the estate distributed bonuses. Only family and longtime staff knew them. Simone looked at the engagement documents. What happens after Grant signs? Grant opened the draft agreement and read beyond the marriage provisions. Buried in an attached schedule was the transfer of the old hotel and 16 surrounding properties into a new holding company. Voss Beaumont Urban Renewal. Juliet would control 51%. Grant's voice became quiet. You told me this concerned one abandoned hotel. These parcel numbers match the covenant list, Simone said. Juliet's composure cracked. Your father trapped valuable property for servants who no longer work here. Lillian's eyes filled, but her voice stayed firm. Those servants raised Grant after his mother left. They cared for Arthur when he could no longer walk. They kept this family alive. They were paid. They were promised dignity. Grant closed the agreement. The signing is cancelled. Juliet stared at him. You cannot decide based on an old Maid story. No, Grant said. I'm deciding based on your contract. He called his legal counsel and ordered every transfer frozen. Then the library lights went out. A crash came from the table. When the emergency lamps flickered on, the covenant page was gone. The French doors stood open to the storm. And Lillian had disappeared. Simone ran to the terrace. Her mother's blue coat lay in the rain. Pinned to it was a note. Bring the room 17 key to the old hotel before midnight, or Mrs. Hayes loses more than her pension. For the first time, Simone realized her mother had come expecting danger, not seeking shelter. Simone grabbed her mother's blue coat from the rain. Mom, she shouted into the darkness. No answer came from the gardens. Grant stepped onto the terrace behind her, followed by 2 security officers. The storm had washed away most footprints, but one muddy track led toward the eastern gate. Juliet remained inside the library. Too calm. Simone turned toward her. You knew this would happen. Juliet's expression did not change. You have no proof. My mother disappears seconds after your contract is exposed, and the kidnappers demand the only key that can destroy your deal. Grant faced his fiancée. Where is Felix Ward? I don't manage his movements. You employ him. He works for my family. Call him. Juliet folded her arms. No. Grant took out his phone. Then I'll ask the police to find him. Fear flashed across her face. Only for a second. Grant, involving the police could get Lillian hurt. Simone stepped closer. That sounds like something the kidnappers would say. Grant looked at security. Confine Juliet to the guest wing. Take her phone, tablet, and car keys. You cannot imprison me. I am preventing you from warning whoever took Mrs. Hayes. As the guards escorted Juliet away, she looked back at Simone. You have no idea what your mother protected you from. Simone's pulse quickened. What does that mean? Juliet smiled faintly. You should ask her why your birth certificate was sealed. Then she disappeared through the library doors. Grant looked at Simone. Did you know? No. Could it be a bluff? Simone held the wet coat against her chest. With Juliet, every lie seems to contain one piece of truth. They left for the old Beaumont Hotel 20 minutes later. Grant refused to bring a large security team. Instead, his head of security, Malcolm Reed, followed in an unmarked vehicle with 2 officers while Simone and Grant drove ahead. The hotel stood at the edge of the abandoned textile district, 12 stories of dark brick and boarded windows. A broken gold sign still hung above the entrance. Beaumont Grand. Simone stared at the building. My mother brought me here once when I was little. Grant looked at her. You remember this place? Only the lobby. She said she worked in the kitchen during private events. She never mentioned room 17? No. They entered through a side door opened by the metal tag. Inside, dust covered the marble floor. Torn curtains hung from the walls, and old chandeliers swayed slightly in the wind. A single lamp burned near the reception desk. Someone expected them. On the counter lay a telephone. It rang. Grant answered. A distorted voice said, "Place the key inside the service lift. Let Lillian speak first." For several seconds, there was only static. Then Simone heard her mother. "Simone, don't give them the key." A hand struck Lillian. Simone flinched. "Mom." The distorted voice returned. "Room 17 opens at midnight. If we don't have the key before then, The old woman stays inside when the building burns. The call ended. Grant checked the wall clock. 11:38. Simone looked toward the service lift behind the reception desk. Its doors stood open. Inside was a small black box. "Fake the key," Grant said. "They'll test it. Then we give them the real one and follow the lift." Simone shook her head. "My mother risked everything to protect those records. And I'm not trading her life for paper. It isn't only paper. If Juliet gets those deeds, every family connected to the trust loses everything." Grant met her eyes. "Then we save both." He placed a tracking device beneath the key and closed it inside the black box. The elevator doors shut. Instead of moving upward, the floor indicator descended. B2. Then disappeared. Grant frowned. "The hotel plans show only one basement. Your family seems to enjoy hidden floors." Malcolm's voice came through Grant's earpiece. "The tracker is moving beneath the building, heading west." "There's a tunnel," Simone said. They crossed the lobby and found the old laundry room. Behind a row of rusted machines, Grant discovered fresh scratches on the wall. A concealed door opened into a narrow underground passage. They followed the tracker beneath the hotel. At the end stood a steel gate marked with the number 17. The key had already been removed from the elevator box. Voices echoed beyond the gate. Felix Ward spoke first. "The old woman remembers too much." Another man replied. "She only matters until we open the room." Simone recognized the second voice. It belonged to Arthur Beaumont's former attorney, Calvin Rusk, a man who had publicly claimed the employee covenant never existed. Grant looked at her. "He is still alive. My mother said he vanished after your father died." A third voice entered the conversation. "Juliet. Stop wasting time. Open the room." Grant's face hardened. "She escaped the estate." Malcolm answered through the earpiece. "One of the guards was found unconscious. Juliet used his access card." Simone peered through the gate. Her mother sat tied to a chair beside an old furnace. Felix held the room 17 key. Juliet stood near a reinforced vault door while Calvin Rusk entered a code. Simone noticed something else. A framed photograph leaned against the wall. It showed Lillian holding a newborn baby beside Arthur Beaumont. On the back, written in large letters, was the name. Simone Beaumont. Simone stopped breathing. Grant saw it too. Before either could react, Lillian looked toward the gate and shouted, "Grant, don't open that vault. Simone is your father's daughter." Simone gripped the steel gate. "Mom, what did you say?" Inside the underground chamber, every person went still. Juliet turned toward Lillian with pure fury. "You promised never to tell her." Lillian sat tied beside the furnace, rainwater still dripping from her gray hair. "I promised Arthur I would protect her," she replied. "I never promised to protect you." Grant stared at the photograph leaning against the wall. His father stood beside Lillian, one hand resting gently over the newborn in her arms. The name written across the back was unmistakable. Simone Beaumont. Grant's voice came out low. "My father had another daughter." Calvin Rusk stepped between him and the vault. "Arthur never legally acknowledged her." "That wasn't my question." Felix drew a pistol from beneath his coat. "Both of you step away from the gate." Grant raised his hand slightly, but Simone did not move. "Why did my mother raise me under another name?" she demanded. Lillian looked at her through tears. "Because Arthur believed someone would kill you if your identity became public." Juliet laughed bitterly. "No one wanted to kill a maid's child. Arthur was protecting his reputation." "That is a lie," Lillian said. Calvin moved toward the furnace controls. "Open the vault, Juliet. We are running out of time." The old furnace had been connected to fuel lines running beneath room 17. A digital timer fixed to the wall counted down from 18 minutes. Grant looked at the flames beginning to glow behind the metal grate. "You planned to burn the records." "And the building," Calvin replied. "A tragic electrical fire in an abandoned hotel. With Mrs. Hayes inside. She is the only living witness who can authenticate Arthur's signature." Simone's hands curled around the bars. You were going to murder her. Felix pointed the weapon directly at her. Give us room to work. Juliet inserted the metal tag into the vault mechanism, but the door remained locked. A small screen illuminated. Second authorization required. Calvin swore. Arthur changed the system. Lillian looked toward Simone. The ceramic button inside my handbag. Simone remembered the wooden box from the estate. Her mother's handbag had fallen beside the library table before she vanished. Grant still had it inside his coat. He opened the bag and found a white button sewn beneath the lining. When he pulled it free, a narrow metal pin extended from its center. Juliet held out her hand. Give it to me. No, Simone said. Felix pressed the pistol through the gate. Then your mother dies first. Grant quietly touched the transmitter hidden beneath his shirt cuff. Malcolm and the officers were moving through the tunnel, but the steel gate prevented them from entering without triggering the alarm attached to the furnace. They needed time. Grant looked at Lillian. Tell us the truth. All of it. Calvin shook his head. We are not here for family history. You need Simone to open the vault, Grant said. Arthur built a two-person lock. One key was left with Lillian. The other was hidden for his daughter. Juliet stared at Simone. She doesn't even know how to use it. Then you need her alive. Grant's logic forced Felix to lower the gun slightly. Lillian took a breath. Arthur met Simone's mother, Camille Hayes, while inspecting the textile mill. Camille was a labor attorney representing workers whose pensions had been stolen. Simone's eyes filled. You told me my mother died in an accident. She did, Lillian said. But not the accident I described. Calvin's face tightened. Lillian continued. Camille discovered that Calvin and Juliet's father were purchasing condemned employee housing through shell companies. They planned to remove the residents, redevelop the land, and keep the trust money. Grant looked at the 17 deeds. The same properties in the covenant. Yes. Arthur initially signed several transfers without understanding what they contained. When Camille showed him the truth, he cancelled the deal and created the employee covenant. Juliet stepped closer to Lillian. My father built the Voss company from those properties. Your father stole them. Simone asked the question she feared most. What happened to Camille? Lillian's voice broke. She was driving to meet a federal investigator when her brakes failed. Arthur believed Calvin arranged it, but he could not prove it. Calvin's calm expression finally cracked. You have repeated that fantasy for 30 years. Lillian looked at him. Arthur recorded your confession. Silence swallowed the chamber. Calvin glanced toward the vault. That reaction told Grant the recording existed. Lillian continued. Camille had given birth only 9 days earlier. Arthur was terrified the people who killed her would come for the baby. He asked me to take Simone, change her surname, and raise her as my own. Simone's eyes burned. You weren't paid. Arthur offered money. I refused everything except enough to keep us hidden during the first year. You gave up your life for me. Lillian smiled through her tears. You were my life. Juliet seized her by the hair. Enough. Simone surged toward the gate. Take your hands off her. Felix raised the gun again, but Grant slammed the metal tag against the gate's emergency release. Sparks burst from the panel. The alarm screamed. Calvin rushed toward the furnace controls. Burn it now. He struck the ignition switch. Flames roared through the pipes beneath the vault. At the same moment, Malcolm and 2 officers reached the tunnel entrance behind Grant. Felix fired. The bullet struck the gate. Grant tackled him through the partially released opening, driving the gun from his hand. Simone squeezed through and ran toward Lillian. Juliet grabbed the ceramic pin from Grant's fallen coat and rushed to the vault. You don't understand, she screamed. Those deeds are worth hundreds of millions. She forced the pin into the second lock. The vault opened. Inside were rows of sealed legal files, film reels, audio cassettes, and original property deeds. At the center sat a red ledger bearing the Voss family crest. Calvin reached for it. Lillian shouted, the black cylinder. Simone saw a narrow cylinder fixed beneath the vault shelf. She pulled it free and twisted the end. A recording began playing through a small internal speaker. Calvin's younger voice filled the room. "Camille's car will never reach the investigator. After she is gone, Arthur will sign anything to protect the child." Then Juliet's father answered. "And the Beaumont son? He inherits the company." The daughter disappears with the maid. Calvin lunged toward Simone. Grant intercepted him. The two men crashed into the ledger table as smoke poured from the furnace vents. Malcolm restrained Felix while the officers forced Calvin to the floor. Juliet grabbed the red ledger and ran toward a rear passage. Simone followed. They reached a narrow maintenance bridge above the furnace chamber. Heat rose beneath the metal grating. Juliet held the ledger over the flames. "One step closer and every name burns. That book proves your family stole from hundreds of workers," Simone said. "It also proves Arthur was involved. Then let it prove everything." Juliet stared at her. "You would destroy your own father's name? I would rather know the whole truth than inherit a protected lie." The answer shook Juliet more than any threat. She had built her life around the belief that powerful families survived by controlling what others were allowed to know. Simone stepped forward. "You threw my mother into the storm because you thought dignity belonged only to people with money. Now you are standing over the evidence that proves your family built its fortune by stealing from people like her." Juliet lifted the ledger higher. Then Lillian's voice came from behind them. "Simone, move." Simone stepped aside. Lillian pulled the furnace's emergency release. A steel fire shield dropped between the bridge and the flames. Juliet's escape route closed. She tried to run, but Malcolm reached the bridge and arrested her. Fire crews entered minutes later and extinguished the furnace before it reached the vault. Every original deed, recording, and financial ledger survived. Calvin Rusk was charged with kidnapping, conspiracy, attempted murder, fraud, and involvement in Camille's death. Felix faced charges for armed abduction and attempted arson. Juliet was charged with kidnapping, fraud, unlawful property transfers, and attempting to destroy evidence. The engagement ended before the sun rose. DNA testing later confirmed that Simone was Arthur Beaumont's biological daughter and Grant's younger half-sister. Grant expected her to demand half of the estate. She asked for something else. Restore the covenant first. The 17 properties were returned to the employee trust. Former workers and their surviving families received the pension payments, housing support, and medical benefits denied to them for 2 decades. Grant also reopened the investigation into his father's role. Arthur's early signatures on the fraudulent transfers became public, along with the evidence showing he later tried to stop the scheme. Simone refused to turn him into either a hero or a villain. "He made terrible mistakes," she said at the public hearing. Then he tried to correct them. The truth should be allowed to contain both. Lillian was recognized as the legal guardian who protected Arthur's daughter and preserved the covenant at enormous personal risk. Months later, Simone and her mother returned to the Beaumont estate. This time, they did not arrive through a service entrance. Grant stood at the main door waiting for them. A new brass plaque had been placed beside it. "This home honors every person who built it." Simone looked at her brother. "You changed the door." Grant opened it wide. "No. You and your mother changed who it opens for." Lillian entered first. Not as an unwanted visitor. Not as a former servant. But as the woman whose courage had saved a child, protected 17 families, and carried the truth through 20 silent years. Juliet had thrown her into the rain because she believed power meant deciding who belonged inside. In the end, Grant opened the door for both women, and discovered that one of them had always belonged to his family, while the other had done more than anyone else to preserve it.